Guys, Apple's making a robot.
Welcome to All Future, where we talk things tech, Apple, AI, and sometimes robotics or Apple robotics throughout the week. And that's what we're talking about today. Thanks so much for watching these videos. We really appreciate it. We're bringing out regular videos throughout the week, and it's a lot of fun to just talk all of this future tech stuff with Matt over here.
Love talking about robots.
Yeah. So Apple robots is what we're talking about this week. And this comes in a number of forms. One is the kind of future form that we can envision from, I don't know, sci-fi in general. And the humanoid robot form factor is something Apple is working on. But first is them building more manufacturing robots. So we already know every manufacturing facility at this point is using automation to some degree. But apparently Apple recently, or at least within the last couple of years, their senior president of operations said that they want to reduce the number of workers on iPhone final assembly lines by as much as 50% over the next few years. And essentially that involves them bringing back automation technologies that they had previously been working on but shelved because of high cost. And now they're bringing them back because they're just going to realize that cost and look for the long-term benefit here. But we've seen Apple robots in the past. I think ones for recycling, ones that weren't quite doing what we expected. What are your thoughts on Apple's future robotics here?
Well, yeah, obviously, I'm sure they're very interested in doing in the manufacturing process. Apple has had a sordid history a little with the workforce there in China, and in terms of I don't know, the human rights of it all, I guess. I mean, I remember it was a big deal where the Foxconn factory put up nets across the roof so that people would stop committing suicide.
Yeah.
You should probably look at your processes if that's the sort of thing that's happening at a plant that's making your products. And of course, Apple isn't alone in this. The majority of electronics are at least somewhat assembled or created in China. And China, not a place known for the best labor protection laws.
Yeah.
So I could see from a moral standpoint and Apple wanting to introduce these robots, from a PR standpoint, wanting to do it, and from probably an economic standpoint at some point, right? Like you talk about the kind of where's that balance, that shift that happens when it's cheaper to make things with a robot or rather than with a person. And I think as robotics get cheaper, as processing gets better, that's starting to be a real question for a lot of these companies. And we're kind of talking about it as a good thing here, but obviously robots have been taking humans' jobs for a long time, and that's just going to keep getting faster. So I think that's kind of where Apple is looking at it right now. But the real thing, though, this is what people get real excited about. As Apple, the more they start to dabble in this robotic stuff in the industrial side, the more they can start thinking of making that dream at-home robot that you have sold me on that I want.
I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, that dream humanoid robot, because it can learn how to do things that humans do. And it can learn how to do them easier and probably easier than a human would have to learn it, because it could, in theory, in the future, watch a video of something being done, do a little bit of training within itself in kind of a virtual way, and then perform that task. So one thing we saw this week, there's a few different robots that are being worked on and are very impressive. One of them is Figure 01. Their robot is autonomously performing some real-world tasks at a BMW factory. So there's a video of it doing this, and it's one of those things where initially it's like, oh, wow, that's cool.
It's like, I think I could beat this robot, right?
Which obviously you could. You could do the task that it's doing much faster and with much more precision. But essentially what it's demoing is it can place these pieces, and then one of the pieces doesn't lay perfectly right, and then it corrects it. So it's able to take corrective action on its own. And essentially, I think part of it is that it was trained virtually on doing this task before it was performing it for real.
That's the cool part of it. That's the cool part. The kind of marketing term for it is pixel to action neural networking. So it's essentially virtually learning the task and then doing it in the real world. And this is 100% Android sci-fi stuff, right? You see this almost every depiction of super smart androids, where all of a sudden, whatever, the android picks up and, plays Mozart on a violin, And they're like, how'd you do that? And he's like, I just learned all of Mozart's catalog in 0.2 seconds or
Yeah.
whatever. But that's the kind of thing that this technology is able to do, right? It's able to simulate something a million times before it has to do it for real.
Yeah.
And learn how to do it without the cost and time associated with teaching a human to do it, or teaching a robot to do it in the real world, or having a human program that robot. It can just run it all virtually and then go and do it. And you talked about it kind of messes up and fixes itself. That's kind of the interesting thing, is it can learn this virtually and then learn how to handle different problems before it actually has to do it. So it can, within a matter of moments, experience everything that could go wrong on that assembly line, understand the actions it's supposed to take, and then recognize when it's in that situation and do it, which is something that it takes a human years to get that level of proficiency. So kind of cool, even though the demo seems pretty lame when you watch it.
Yeah,
Like it's like,
it does.
I am a robot. Like it's so slow and meandering. But you got to like just see the vision, and then what's impressive is how it learned to do this, not that it's doing it.
Yeah. Did you see Inside Out 2?
I have not seen Inside Out.
So
2. Is there a reference I need to know from Inside Out 2?
Well, I don't want to go too spoilery, so spoiler alert.
Minor spoiler alert for Inside Out 2,
But
guys.
there's a character anxiety.
Okay.
As is like a new emotion in the head, and it's like predicting every possible way that a scenario could go wrong. And that's kind of like fear in the first movie, but it's like to the nth degree in this one because it's anxiety. And I feel like that's what a robot does in this scenario. It thinks through every possible scenario and everything that could go wrong so that it can do it. But it probably does it better than us acting on fear and anxiety.
Yeah, exactly.
But all of these robots, it raises a lot of question for jobs, of course, and then industry. And then are maybe more of the jobs in the future going to be, one, designing these robots, and then two, maintaining these robots?
Sure.
Because once they're made, it's not going to be a perfect system. They're going to have things that go wrong. They're going to have parts that need fixing. Could you see that becoming kind of more of a big thing? We're still decades away from this.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, that's what always happens, right? A new industry gets introduced, and then kind of the peripheral industries are built up around it to support it. Talking about China and manufacturing over there, something this could do is bring manufacturing back to the U.S. in a bigger way, because you're not. Unfortunately, not to give U.S. citizens jobs, because it would go to the robots. But I guess maybe they would have jobs in that peripheral bubble around it. But it would, it would make it so where we're not ceding so much of our manufacturing capability to China mainly. But of course, other places too do manufacturing. So that's kind of interesting. Either way, this is happening, right? Like nothing's going to stop this train. Like the capitalism train is rolling on robotics, and it's hitting that breaking point where it's cheaper to use robotics than anything else. That's what people are going to end up doing, and especially as they become smarter and smarter and smarter, and these true kind of AI robots, right? Like when you see how that Figure 01 robots communicates with people in the demo where it's running the OpenAI language model. That's pretty amazing, actually. It's really cool to watch. Much more impressive than this BMW video.
Yeah.
Like, watch that video, because that shows the real future of these things, which is naturalistic humanoid robots interacting with people on a daily basis.
And ultimately, these things can help bring costs down on products that we maybe need costs to be down. One could argue we need costs to come down on electric vehicles so that more can adopt them, because we need that for various reasons, for the economy and for the environment and everything. So this robot could help make that assembly process even cheaper. And essentially, they're not going to be using the Figure robot. They're going to be using the Optimus robot, which is what Tesla is working on. And the latest rumors for that one is that it's supposed to come sometime in 2025. So, grain of salt there.
So when you say
course.
coming in 2025, that means I can buy this robot
No,
in 2025? All right.
Yeah. I think having like a reasonable one that can do things is kind of the vision there, because they already have a couple of them in their factories doing basic tasks. It's probably similar to this Figure 01 demo, where it's doing something and it's impressive. It's doing it. It's on its own, but it's only impressive if you really know the process and the future path of where this training would go. But Elon most recently said they'd have 1,000 in their factory by 2025, or like the end of 2025.
Sure,
yeah,
Elon.
I I don't
Fool me, watch Elon. Jeez, yeah. But I'm sure they're going to have a lot. They seem to be introducing more and more. So.
They definitely have a handful or a dozen, it seems like, at their factory or in their testing areas for this robot. So things are being worked on. And then it's just this idea of, for Apple, are they going to go more consumer or are they going to go more, manufacturing with this kind of
Eventually,
thing?
they're going to go consumer, right? And look, I think Apple's probably learning a lot of lessons from the AI stuff, in that they go, whether it's rightly or wrongly, the perception is Apple was behind on AI, and they have this plan to catch up, but they still haven't yet, right? Like no one out there is using Apple Intelligence yet, right? It's not even out yet. So are they looking at spaces like robotics and going, we want to make sure we're not left behind in that space anymore? I think there's probably kind of a cultural shift that has happened in Apple over the last year, maybe, and that they went, oh, did we miss something here with this AI? Can we make sure that doesn't happen again? Because there's no reason to. Apple has all the money, all the resources in the world. There's no reason for them to be left behind on a technology, and robots could be one of those big things. And I suspect it will. The question is just the timetable. Is everyone having a humanoid robot 20 years away, or is it 100 years away?
Yeah.
But either way, I think Apple wants to be on top of it now and not even have that, even a hint that they've been left behind somehow because the iPhone 35 doesn't support humanoid robot interaction or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually really fascinating. I understand all viewpoints on the man, but Elon Musk, on their shareholder meeting, he kind of started talking right in about the future of Tesla, and he said, like, we're not just writing a new chapter, we're starting a new book, and talking about AI and robotics. And he went into this whole pitch that it's like you're seeing his whole vision in his head of like humanoid robots being 2-to-1 humans, so everyone having two of them. And what that means for the industry, how many have to be manufactured, what the cost would be to manufacture them, what the profit would be, how much market share Tesla could have versus the entire industry, and how there's other companies that will do it if Tesla doesn't. It's pretty wild.
Jeez. The problem is that 2-to-1 number, I think that's realistic. I don't think it's every human owning two robots. I think it's the average of humans owning robots is like 0.25 to a person, and then all these huge companies own millions of robots that have replaced us.
That's probably true, and that leads to a whole other bigger discussion. But speaking of manufacturing, we got another demo from another company. It's always kind of cool that we're seeing these from different companies. It's not like one company giving us a demo. It's all these different ones doing some sort of impressive demo. This is the Turbo Bot, which is from Tokyo Robotics, and here it's hammering a nail. And my first question, well, I have a lot of questions. First, I think it does a decent job at hammering this nail in. It's more force than I expected it to do. It gets it right in there. It does a solid job. It seems like it's very consistent, potentially more consistent than a human would be at that height, just on average. I'm trying to go positive here. No?
I got a couple things. One, I'm going to go with the pronunciation of it as Torobo, like Tokyo Robotics. I think it's probably what they're going for.
That makes a lot of sense.
I could be wrong on that, but I think that's what they're going for.
Torobo,
yeah, Torobo. This thing sucks. What are you talking about? This thing is terrible. Like, I'm watching the demo and I keep expecting more to happen. I'm like, oh, it's going to nail this nail in, then move the board, reset another nail, and put another nail in. Even that would be cool.
Yeah.
The video starts with the nail already set.
Yeah. Someone already nailed the nail.
The hardest part of nailing.
Yeah.
Right? And then it proceeds to nail, I think, pretty much as effectively as an experienced construction guy. Certainly way less effective than a nail gun. And I'm someone who has practiced single hammer nailing before.
Really?
Yes. This is another one of my really bizarre stories. When I was in a fighter squadron in the Air Force, and when you leave, most fire squadrons have bars, like literal like bars in the squadron, right? And everyone's call sign is on these little wooden plaques, and they use it on the scheduling board. And then when you leave, they have this thing called your nailing, where you get to nail your plaque up along the roof of the bar in the squadron, And I was in the 44 Fire Squadron in Japan, so they had like stuff up there from like Vietnam and shit, right? Like, so it's like, so I got to nail my thing up there, and you have to take a shot for every swing you do, and you're probably already drunk by the time it's time for you to do this thing. And I've seen dudes go up there with a nail and boom, one nail through. I'm pretty sure it's some kind of trick, when they do that. But I think a good swing of the nail that they're showing right now. I think a good person can do that two hits, 3 max, which is I think the robot does it in 3, maybe 4. So the robot is doing the equivalent of someone who practiced doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Not impressed with this robot. Tell robot, get out of here. This is a garbage robot.
Well, yeah, it's an example of the future. It's a vision of it's doing the basic form and it'll get better, right?
Sure.
Sure?
Just come up with different demos, man. Like these are like engineers coming up with these demos, and they're like, "This is so impressive." This thing, and I get that that's a lot of code. This is actually impressive, right? I'm kind of joking, but that's not impressive to normal people. Like they need PR people to come in here and come up with the demos for these things.
Yeah,
because you can tell it's very clearly engineering nerds going like, look at this impressive thing, and it does not look impressive to the regular person at all. And that's when you're going to need like someone like Apple to come in there and make the amazing commercial that sells people on these things, because showing a slow moving assembly of a car or a human level nailing of a nail is not very impressive.
I guess the advantage is they can work 24 hours a day. So instead of if it takes twice as long for it to nail something, at least it can
but it has
do
no
a
brakes
double
or
shift.
whatever. Sure.
Yeah.
But then what's your like wear down cost of that and stuff like there's all kind of things you gotta start
There's
thinking
so many
about,
things.
right? Yeah, like so it's whatever. This is nascent technology. It is actually cool that's doing this stuff. But I think I am of the opinion we are still we're like 50 years away from these things, man. And I could be way off, right? Like AI exploded, right? And that came together way faster than a lot of people thought. The kind of generative AI stuff that's around now in large language models. But it's to get the cost down on this. These things are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars right now. If we're gonna actually have this in a home, probably $25K is the max. You're gonna have to charge for these things. So I still think we're those ways away.
Yeah, it's going to be a while, but it's always cool to see the development and the different things from these companies, especially on the small scale. But on the larger scale, there's a lot of cool technology, and I think one of the coolest ones out there right now that we're seeing, at least it's in its infancy, is 3D printed homes. So home cost is obviously always insane and getting worse. And so
we live in LA. Like, this is crazy here. $1 million garbage houses all over the place.
Yeah. So the idea of 3D printed houses is just it can come together quicker. Materials can be, I think, probably more environmentally friendly in some ways.
It's
and
concrete,
and then it's able to be built very quickly. And it's really impressive to see. It's kind of just like looks like a frosting extruder, but much bigger, and it's extruding concrete and doing it on multiple levels. You watched this video. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I like this for a couple of reasons. One, again, I think the housing crisis in the United States is very real. I mean, mostly due to corporate ownerships of homes, but sure, the manufacturing costs too in there. So let's figure that out. I also think the way we build homes in America is insane. Like, why can I can just me with a hammer could destroy 90% of the homes built in the last 10 years, which is crazy. It's
or that robot could.
That robot, yeah. Again, that's
with
the
hammer.
tow robo could destroy these houses. So that tells you how good they're built. It's funny. I've mentioned this podcast before. I'm restoring a Victorian home, 1890s home, and we'll have the contractor guys come out there, and you can tell anything that's a newer build on it because that's where all the problems are. And the contract, I was talking to one of the guys, and he's all like, "Yeah, man, it's because when this was built, it was either built by a person who's going to live there, so they built it good, or you could still legally shoot people in the streets, so they built stuff good, And you look at how stuff is built now; it's built to flip. It's built by these, big corporations that are designed to just make it look good enough for the show. And then within a year, the cabinets are falling apart and all these things. It's garbage. It's garbage how we build homes in America. And you go to other places, concrete, man. Concrete builds great houses. Like it's maybe not as aesthetically pleasing. You can do stuff to make it nicer, but concrete is a much better building material for homes than the wood and sheetrock and plastic siding that we put on stuff now. So I think this is cool for that. So I like that, and then I also like that it's just a different way of thinking about stuff, right? Like I like it's kind of a cliche, but I like disruptor stuff. Right, like come in there with this thing. I do it a little differently. So I think this tech is cool. It at least looks neat. This is a good demo. This is a much better demo than the hammer and the nail thing,
Yeah.
right? Because you look at this and you're like, oh man, they're building a house. You see it kind of forming up. And it does look like one of those tabletop 3D printers, which is kind of funny, except
Yeah.
just huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this stuff is cool. I think you combine this with some kind of robotic system. You can start getting the cost of manufacturing down for homes, which I think is a good thing. So yeah, cool tech.
So picture that much better version of Torobo next to the 3D printing happening, and then he is hammering in whatever frame or whatever
Yeah.
is necessary, and it's gotten way better. Yeah, that's a cool way to. It may not be actually undercutting the real problem, but it
Yeah.
helps us actually.
You got to start somewhere, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but for now, on the Apple side of things, looks like we're going to be seeing a lot more manufacturing robots, and that's going to be going specifically with iPhone production in the meantime, but probably everything. And as with everything Apple, I'm assuming that tech is going to be trickling down. They're going to be like, oh, wow, this is working really well, and we're applying our own Apple intelligence to it. It's working really well. How can we market this to the consumer?
Can't wait to buy it.